afternoon. Thank you. My name is Matthew Bullington. I wear a bunch of hats. I am the president of the Middle Tennessee Home Education Association. We have a statewide organization that's designed to help support Tennessee homeschooling. And at a state level, it works to make homeschooling legal. We actually have a representative from the organization who watches all that's going on in terms of educational laws at the state capitol. And the state is then broken up into regions. So I'm the president of the Middle Tennessee region. We have the region that's closest to you, the Smoky Mountain Home Education Association. They are here today. They have a table, and you should definitely check them out. But we're designed to basically help equip Tennessee homeschoolers with the resources, the networks, the communities that are local to you, and to make homeschooling possible. As I mentioned, I've worn a lot of hats through the years. I have, in addition to being on the state board, I actually was a part of the team back in 2011. I was the representative to the state capitol that worked to rewrite our local homeschool laws to what they are today. So I was actually there at every single education committee meeting back in 2011 when we rewrote homeschooling legally. And so I want to take some time today to talk with you about some of the nuts and bolts about how homeschooling works in the state of Tennessee, what's nuanced to our state. Is there anyone who has homeschooled in a different state? Out of curiosity. Okay, so some of you have homeschooled in other situations, moved to here, so I want to explain sort of the differences that are specific to Tennessee and just talk about some of the resources available to you. On a side note with that, I also am a private guidance counselor. That's actually what I do as a living, is I work with families with high school students on how to prepare for college. I'm the high school guidance counselor for Teach Them Diligently as well, and speak at all of their events, and I've spoken at over 100 homeschool conventions over the past several years. So have a variety of different things I'd like to cover, but I really want to start with the basics in terms of how to legally homeschool in the state. I do have to qualify, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm very intimately familiar with the law. And so in Tennessee, we have three options that are available to you. So the first option is as an independent homeschooler. And this is where you have the option to get started homeschooling by registering with what we refer to as your local education agency, or your LEA. And this is where you would go to your local public school and say, hey, I want to homeschool. And it's really basic in terms of that route in the state. You basically will get a form where you will declare, here are the days that I am homeschooling. You will be tracked in terms of attendance through that public school. So they will keep records for compulsory attendance statutes that are turned into the state. You know, they will keep track of the fact that you have homeschooled for 180 days throughout the year, and that is our state requirement. And then, basically at the end of each year, you're going to turn in that form that says, here are the dates that I homeschooled. They do have a testing requirement. So if you choose to go this route, you will have to sit in and take tests at your local public school in 5th, 7th, and 9th grade. And so there is that sort of extra caveat of going that route. Now, it is completely free if you go this route, but you do have those testing, and then there are advantages and disadvantages to each route to homeschool. If you're independently homeschooling, obviously you have the flexibility if I can declare at any point, and it's completely free, but you don't have an advocate. You are having to interface with your local public school and basically talk with your local public school office every year about your continuing homeschool journey. And so that can be awkward for some families, especially if you've been in that public school and now you're having to leave that public school but still interface with them on an annual basis. You also don't have an advocate on your side. Obviously, that public school is about public education, and they are not supportive of homeschooling. Legally in the state, they have to keep your records, and so there's nothing that they can do to prevent you from starting to homeschool at any point. But there's no advocate on your side. And then when it gets to high school, there's actually a whole other element in that they do not issue you a diploma. they don't issue you transcripts. And so you, the parent, have the responsibility of being the guidance counselor for your family. You have to communicate with every single college your student applies to. You have to make up your own transcript, your own diploma. You have to send it to them. And there are options in Tennessee where that's not required. So basically, you have that route. The only real caveat is you, the parent, have to either have a GED or you have to have a high school diploma. And that's really the basics. So we have that first option. Then we have option 2, which is registering under a Category 4 church-related school. And this is actually one of the routes that I was on the team for THEA that we worked to really get codified back in 2011. And the way this is done is in our state, we're a little bit different than a lot of other states. We have these Category 4 church-related schools. And they're basically religious organizations that say, hey, for religious reasons, we want to be able to educate according to our own beliefs and according to our, own view of what's important for our kids. So we've written into the law this mechanism where basically as a homeschool family, you can come under that umbrella school, as we refer to it. So you may hear umbrella school, you may hear Category 4, you may hear church-related schools. Those are all the same thing. But the idea is that I can come under that entity and they will keep my records, and they will make sure that I meet compulsory attendance statutes in the state, which says, okay, this student has gone to school for 180 days, from age 6 through 17. And so that entity then has to pass state requirements in terms of how they operate. But some of the advantages with this is, one, you have an advocate on your side, and we actually have an umbrella school, Aliyah Academy, who's here today. Definitely recommend checking them out in the back. But you basically have somebody who is passionate about homeschooling, who you are interfacing with along this homeschool journey. So you have a team member when you are homeschooling under an umbrella school. And so as a state organization, we're really, we're a little biased towards the umbrella school route. It's not the only route. There are other options, but we definitely are biased towards that, in that you have a homeschool-friendly advocate for you. You can call up and say, hey, here's my situation, and you have a counselor. Pretty much all of the umbrella schools have some sort of interface where you can call and get questions answered. They each have their own little different flavor in terms of their requirements. The way our state law is written, they have a lot of flexibility in terms of what their credit requirements are, and their credit requirements are your requirements. So most of the time, they're very flexible until you get up to high school, and then a lot more parameters come into play in the high school years. But even the credits that are required to graduate vary based upon which umbrella school you're under. So you want to make sure that you have a good working relationship with your umbrella school, because they are the final say. They're the ones who say, okay, yes, you have to take Bible every year, or okay, you have to have a track, or hey, we have options for you if you're going to college or if you're not going to college. So make sure that you have a good working relationship. I always say, basically, check in at least at the beginning before each semester with your umbrella school and say, hey, these are my plans. Are these all good? Is there anything that you have any red flags about? You need to be communicating at a minimum before every single semester, so that you can make sure that your path is matching up with their requirements. But you do have an extra cost. There is a cost per child or per family. Those costs vary, but usually you're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $100 to $200 for a family for a year. Can vary from there, but in our opinion, it's definitely worth spending so that you can have that surety of, hey, we're making sure we're staying on track, and we're not having to deal with our public school every single time that we're turning in our records. Also, an advantage of umbrella schools is that when it gets to high school, they keep your transcripts, and they will create an official transcript, and they will create your diploma, and they will send that for you to the colleges that your student applies to, or the trade schools that your students apply to. They keep your formal records, whereas you do not have any formal records through independent homeschooling. So that's another advantage of homeschooling under your umbrella school. And then the third option is enrolling in what's referred to as a Category 3 online accredited school. Sometimes they'll say online accredited, sometimes they'll say online learning, but basically it's a school that is fully accredited, and a lot of people get hung up on the accreditation. Accreditation really, in my experience, does not matter except in the case where you are planning on going back to public school or private school. And even then, it doesn't guarantee that your credits will transfer back. It just basically increases the likelihood that you're going to be tracking with what you would be seeing if you were to go back to public school or private school. Colleges do not care about accreditation. They don't. All right, it does not matter to colleges. It does not matter to trade schools. All right, they have seen the advantages of home education. They want homeschool students. I've seen that over the past 14 years I've worked as a private guidance counselor. Colleges love homeschool students, and so you're going to have options available. It's basically the only advantage is, one, that there's a lot of structure that usually comes with online accredited schools. You usually are having to follow their curriculum exactly. And that's part of the requirements for them to be accredited, is they have to know this is what you are learning. And so there's a lot more parameters. There's also higher cost that's with accredited schools. So you're paying extra for having that accredited school experience. So there's 3 different routes. You can change between those routes. So you can start off with one and then say, hey, I need more support, or okay, like this, this route isn't working for me, I need more flexibility, and you can change between them. Legally, we have it to where you can start homeschooling at any time. So you can say, hey, this school year is off to a bad start, and we need a change. And you can start homeschooling right then. I didn't share, but I'm a product of homeschooling myself. I'm a homeschool graduate. I was homeschooled all the way through my high school graduation. I'm now the father of 3 kids that we are homeschooling. My wife was also homeschooled through her high school graduations. So we're a product of homeschooling. Myself, now, second generation, and also on our state leadership. I'm also the representative. We're unique in Tennessee, and that Tennessee is very favorable towards homeschooling legislatively. So the governor actually has a committee that's appointed to represent non-public education to the Tennessee Department of Education, and I am actually the statewide representative for homeschooling to the Tennessee Department of Education. And so you're in a great state for home education. We have a lot of options available to you, a lot of resources that are available to you. If you want to go on to some of the general policies, the general requirements may change depending upon whether you're an umbrella school or whether you're under an online accredited school. But as a state, we have 180 days of compulsory education. So there's 180 days in the year that you're having to homeschool. And you may think, okay, wow, okay, I've got to plan things out. There's a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility under that umbrella, okay? 180 days means your child needs to be learning 180 days out of the year. And as Leslie already said earlier, we're learning every single day, okay? We're learning every single day. And that's one of the beauties of homeschooling, is the fact that we can break apart this artificial notion that education happens in this silo of at school in a classroom. And we can say, no, God created us so that we can learn at all times, in all circumstances. And so we as parents can come alongside our kids and walk them through that journey. So state requirements for homeschooling is 180 days of homeschooling a year, 4 hours of homeschooling per day. It does not mean that you have to have 4 hours of your day that look like public school. It doesn't mean they have to be sitting, in chairs, at a table working through curriculum 4 hours a day. It means they need 4 hours of education in a day. And again, there are days, like Leslie mentioned, where it's like, hey, our education for the day is home ec, and we're going to teach you how to dust and how to vacuum, and we're going to work on, okay, today we are going to go outside and figure out how many leaves and how many plants we can find and collect, and that's education. That's homeschooling. Education can be, hey, we're cooking because we have to eat. But in the process, we're going to talk about nutrition, and we're going to have a little discussion about fractions as we measure things out, and we're going to discuss about budgeting as we figure out how everything, we're going to pay for all these individual ingredients. That's education. And so that 4 hours can easily be made. It can be, hey, we're doing nap time, or not nap time, but quiet time. And we're going to send you out to your room. That's what I did. Growing up, my mom, I was homeschooled all the way through. I was the guinea pig. I was the oldest of 6 kids. So I got to see how everything changed. My mom homeschooled 6 kids all the way through, beginning to graduation. All 4 of us went to college. All 6 of us went to college. We were all paid or fully financed to go to college. So you can get to college. You can still be socially, competent on the other side. But my mom said, okay, she needed a break. And so the way it was growing up is we had an hour that you had an option. You could take a nap or you could sit on your bed and read. And so, that reading time was school, all right? And so an hour a day, it's like, okay, if you got out, if you came downstairs, you were in trouble. You just knew that. Like, that was mom's hour. And usually that hour would then turn into an hour and a half or 2 hours as we would gradually get into, okay, we'd fall asleep as we were reading, or we get interested in a book and it'd be going long. So it's a great tip that I'm using with my own kids. But this whole idea is like, okay, in the middle of the day, okay, schooling is turning into reading time. And we all love to read, me and my siblings as a result now. And my kids love to read because we have cultivated time where it's like, hey, we're just gonna take a break. And your option is you can sleep, or you can enjoy a book. And so there's a lot of flexibility as to what those 4 hours have to look. On the next slide, again, in terms of compulsory attendance, there's state laws ages 6 through 17, or students who are 5 who started homeschooling and were in public school or private school for 6 or more weeks by the age of 5. Basically, if you start earlier and stay schooling for more than 6 weeks, then you have to continue from that point on. Early graduation is permitted, so if you complete all your high school graduation requirements, you can graduate early. That's actually what I did. I graduated at the age of 16 and went on to college from there. So that's the basic nuts and bolts in terms of what's required in our state. If we go to the next slide, again, you can start at any point. And this can apply for you, but this can also apply for your friends. If you have a friend who said, hey, public schooling is not working for us, it doesn't matter if it's February. It doesn't matter if it's the middle of the school year. You can pull them out and say, hey, okay, we're going to declare notice. If you're independent homeschooling, then you just go in and ask for the form. You take out the form, you'll turn it in, and they'll have to track attendance. You'll have to turn in basically attendance, immunization records, or a exemption based upon religious convictions. That's basically gets you started. Or you can call your umbrella school, and this is another great thing about umbrella schools is most umbrella schools in the state will then give notice to your school. So if you're having issues with your school, you don't have to interface with them, and you can say, hey, I want to homeschool. In most cases, that umbrella school is then going to handle letting your previous school know and say, hey, they're now homeschooling. They're under our umbrella in terms of for attendance records. So you can get started at any point and enjoy the amazing journey that is homeschooling. But don't do it alone. If you go on to the next slide, I strongly recommend that you do it in community. Real quick, in terms of sports, we have a lot of resources that are built into state law. We did rewrite state law that, didn't really rewrote an aspect, but then also work a lot with TSSAA to where you can still participate in sports. According to state law, if you are independent homeschooling, you have to be allowed to try out for a team locally. So if you say, hey, I want to try out sports, you can still be involved in sports. A lot of it depends upon your local school district as to their openness based upon if you're under an umbrella school or if you're doing an online accredited agency. But if you're with your local education agency, you have to, by law, be allowed to at least try out. That doesn't mean that you can make the team. But there are options for getting connected in sports. There are options for getting resources for special needs, regardless of which route you go. The school has to provide that, and there's a lot of options. But my big encouragement is that you get support, you get connected in, and there are a ton of ways. It's not the homeschooling that it was when I was growing up, where it's like, okay, we knew the occasional homeschooler out there. With the popularity, the rise of homeschooling, as was mentioned at the beginning, where we're looking at like 10, 11% nationwide of students who are homeschooling. That's huge. But I know it's gotten to where I can go in and the idea that I'm homeschooling is no longer this oddity. Instead of it's like, oh, well, my child just started homeschooling our granddaughter, and do you have any recommendations on resources there? So get plugged in, find what your community is. And your community can be a co-op. We have some different nuanced terms here in Tennessee. So we have support groups, which are basically groups that are just available for resources, for meetups. We have co-ops, which are a little more formalized. They meet up and have group instruction on classes, but usually that's to where parents are volunteering to teach those classes, and there's some collectivity in terms of the parent teaches the classes, and there's usually a lower cost. In Tennessee, we also have a lot of homeschool tutorials, and that's a little bit unique to our state, but we have these setups where you can go 1 day, 2 days a week and have paid tutors who will teach more complicated subjects, especially in middle school, junior high, high school years. And so you have options there. And then we have tons of communities, and those communities can meet up in person or virtually. As Leslie mentioned, 365, things did not exist like that 20 years ago. And so take advantage of those opportunities for you to not have to walk along this journey by yourself, to where instead you can have a community that comes alongside and say, hey, we have similar beliefs, we have similar passions, we have similar ideologies, let's get support along this journey, because it is daunting. I will say that as a homeschool dad, it is daunting, this idea that, okay, my child's education is resting on my shoulders. But it's also so rewarding, and I can see that as a homeschool graduate. The relationship that I have with my parents is precious to me, and it's because we had a lot of time together. Quality time and just mundane time, but a lot of time together, and it's a great benefit to home education. I do recommend, we have our statewide organization that does work to protect your legal right in Tennessee to homeschool, and also works on making adjustments as needed, and you can join them by joining your local chapter. And so your local chapter here is the Smoky Mountain Home Education Association, so they've got a table in the back. Definitely check them out, but we've got a lot of tools here to make this doable. It's very doable, and I encourage you just to have an open mind, to be flexible, because it's going to change. What worked for me did not work for my sister, did not work for my brother. What works great 1 year might change the next year, but that's one of the beauties, is this ability for us as parents to grow alongside our kids and to see the different nuanced ways that God gifted them individually. So hope that's encouraging to you. If you have any questions, you're welcome to stop by my table at the end. I do have just 2 sign-up sheets. Is there anybody in here who's homeschooling high school, out of curiosity? Okay, a few of you. So my specialty is high school. I'm a college prep consultant. I do have a whole high school resource guide that I put together. It's completely free. If you want to put your name, email in there in the back, you can get that. And then we also have a free Homeschooling in Tennessee 101 e-course, a little mini course, and there's a sign-up sheet for that in the back, so you can have some of the details, the nitty-gritty details that I talked about here today available for your reference later on. So thank you.